The snow in Philadelphia was falling sideways, driven by a biting wind that howled off the Schuylkill River and rattled the double-paned windows of the 8th floor at Sovereign Heights Medical Center. It was a Tuesday, the graveyard shift, the hour when the city's pulse slowed to a rhythmic slush-covered thrum. Inside the progressive care unit, the air was warm and smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. The unit was a horseshoe shape, a long corridor of glass-fronted rooms wrapped around a central nurse's station that glowed like the bridge of a ship in the dim lighting. Vale Rice sat at the far end of the station, her back to the wall, charting vitals on a computer terminal that hummed with the quiet persistence of modern medicine. She had been at Sovereign Heights for 6 months, a transfer from a small clinic in Montana that nobody had bothered to Google. To the rest of the staff, Vala was a ghost. Efficient, polite, and aggressively boring. She took the extra shifts nobody wanted. She never complained about the workload, and she had an uncanny ability to fade into the background during the morning huddle. She wore her scrubs slightly loose, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, and she walked with a silence that unnerved the night janitors. Tonight, the unit was running heavy. 30 beds, 28 occupied. The staff was a skeleton crew, 3 RNs, 1 nursing assistant, and Murren, the charge nurse, who had been working this floor since the Reagan administration. Murren was at the front desk, arguing in a hushed whisper with the hospital operator about a glitch in the telemetry system. The monitors overhead were flickering, occasionally, tracing green lines that jittered with static before settling back into rhythm. It's the storm, marined, hanging up the phone with a clatter. Maintenance says the grid is fluctuating. If we lose the monitors, we go to manual checks every 15 minutes. Nobody sleep tonight. VA didn't look up from her screen, but her eyes shifted. She wasn't looking at the charts. She was watching the reflection in the darkened window opposite the station. She was watching the elevator bank. There were 4 elevators, 2 for the public, 2 for service. The public elevators were locked down after 9:00 p.m. requiring a badge scan to access the floor. The service elevators were for patient transport and dietry. At 0200 hours, the service elevator chimed. It was a soft sound, barely audible over the wind outside, but Vala's head tilted 2 degrees to the right. The dietary cart had already come and gone. Patient transport wasn't scheduled for any discharges. The doors slid open. 2 men stepped out. They were dressed in the grey jumpsuits of the hospital's HVAC maintenance crew, carrying heavy tool bags slung over their shoulders. They wore caps pulled low and they moved with a synchronization that didn't belong to repairmen. They didn't look at the signs. They didn't look at the floor. They looked at the corners of the ceiling scanning for cameras. Vala's fingers stopped typing. Her heart rate didn't spike. It dropped. It was a physiological trigger she hadn't felt in 4 years. A cold wash of clarity that slowed the world down to frame-by-frame analysis. Maintenance crews walked with a heavy plodding gait, burdened by the hourly wage and the late hour. These men walked on the balls of their feet. Their center of gravity was low. Their hands were free, not tucked in pockets hovering near their waistbands. "Can I help you?" Murren called out, her voice sharp with the authority of the charge nurse. "We didn't call for facilities." The lead man didn't stop. He held up a clipboard without looking at it. "Work order for the negative pressure room. Filter exchange priority 1 from the administrator." His voice was flat, American, generic. It was the voice of someone trying to be unmemorable. "Room 804. Murren frowned, checking her list. "That room is occupied. You can't go in there. The patient is critical." "We'll be quick," the man said, continuing to walk. He wasn't asking for permission. He was closing the distance. Room 804 housed a man, listed as John Doe on the whiteboard. A transfer from the trauma bay 3 days ago. He had arrived with multiple gunshot wounds and no ID, just a police detail that had been surprisingly light. One officer currently dozing in a chair by the room's door. Vala knew the patient wasn't a John Doe. She had seen the way he scanned the room when he woke up. The way he refused pain meds to stay lucid. His name was Torren Gage, a key witness in a federal racketeering case that had turned Philadelphia into a battleground for the last month. The police thought hiding him in plain sight was clever. Vala knew it was a gamble, and the gamble had just failed. Vala stood up. She picked up a stack of linen from the cart next to her, holding it against her chest like a shield. It was a non-threatening posture, the universal sign of a busy nurse doing busy work. She moved away from the station, intercepting the line of travel, but she didn't block them. She moved to the side, flanking them. Murrin, Vala said, her voice pitched low, carrying under the hum of the ventilation. The officer in 804 needs coffee. He's sleeping. It was a code, but not a hospital code. It was a distraction. Murrin looked at her confused. What? The lead repairman turned his head toward Vala. For a split second, they made eye contact. Vala didn't look away, and she didn't blink. She projected a vacant, tired boredom. The man dismissed her as a non-threat and turned back to Murrin. Open the door, nurse, the man said, reaching the locked double doors of the patient wing. Suddenly, the lights in the hallway surged brighter, then died completely. The emergency red floodlights kicked on instantly, bathing the ward in a bloody monochromatic glow. The telemetry monitors went black. The magnetic locks on the unit doors clicked, not open, but deadbolt locked. The system had crashed, but it had failed into a secure mode, sealing the unit. Power failure, the second man said into his collar. He wasn't talking to Murrin. He was talking to a team. We are dark. Proceeding to target. The police officer by room 804 woke up with a start, fumbling for his radio. Dispatch, we lost power at the lead intruder moved. It was a blur of motion that Murrin missed entirely. He closed the 10 feet to the officer in 2 strides. A heavy gloved hand chopping down on the officer's wrist, sending the radio skittering across the floor. In the same motion, he shoved the officer back into the chair, jamming a small cylindrical device against the man's neck. There was a hiss of compressed air, a sedative injector. The officer slumped, unconscious, before he realized he was under attack. Murrin screamed. It was a short shock sound that was cut off as the second man vaulted the nurse's station counter, landing silently next to her. He didn't hit her. He simply placed a hand on her shoulder and shoved her down into the chair. Quiet. Sit. Do not touch the phone. Vala dropped the linen. The time for camouflage was over. The unit was effectively a kill box. 2 hostiles inside, likely more securing the perimeter downstairs. The communications were jammed or cut. She could see the hardline phone on the desk blinking dead. The patient in 804 was a sitting duck. Vala assessed her assets. She had a penlight in her pocket. She had a pair of trauma shears on her hip. She had the element of surprise and she had the terrain. She stepped into the shadows of the supply alcove as the lead man tried the door handle of room 804. It was locked. He reached into his tool bag and pulled out a breaching tool, a heavy hydraulic spreader designed to pop car doors. Hey! The shout came from Dr. Holden, the night resident, who had just emerged from the break room, blinking in the red light. What is going on? You can't be here. The second man, the one guarding Murrin, turned his weapon, a suppressed pistol now drawn from the tool bag toward the doctor. No, Vala whispered. She didn't shout. She didn't scream. She moved. She grabbed a heavy oxygen tank from the rack in the alcove. It was steel E-cylinder weighing about 8 pounds. She didn't throw it. She rolled it. With a precision born of hours on a bowling lane and years in a shoothouse, she bowled the cylinder down the hallway. It rumbled across the linoleum gathering speed. The second man heard the noise and turned, distracted. The cylinder slammed into his shin with a bone-crunching thud. He grunted, stumbling sideways, his aim ruined. In that second of distraction, Vala moved. She didn't run at him. She ran to the central control panel behind the station. It was an old panel controlling the fire doors and the isolation ventilation. She slammed her hand against the isolation all rooms button. Immediately, the loud rushing sound of industrial fans kicked on. The negative pressure systems in all 12 patient rooms roared to life, creating a vacuum effect that made the heavy doors slam shut simultaneously. The noise was deafening, a chaotic white noise that masked footsteps and voice commands. The lead intruder at room 804 spun around, his comms useless in the roar. He looked at his partner, who was limping. They realized they had lost control of the acoustic environment. Vala dropped to a crouch behind the solid oak of the reception desk. She crawled to Murrin, who was shaking, her hands over her mouth. Murrin, Vala said. Her voice wasn't the voice of the quiet transfer nurse. It was the voice of a team leader. It was flat, hard, and devoid of fear. Listen to me. The phones are dead. The elevators are locked. These men are here to kill the patient in 804. Murrin stared at her, eyes wide. Who? Who are you? It doesn't matter, Vala said, grabbing Murrin's wrist to focus her. I need you to take Dr. Holden and get into the bedroom. It has a reinforced door and a keypad lock. Take the other nurses. Do not open the door for anyone but me. Do you understand? But the patient. I have the patient, Vala said. Go now. She shoved Murren toward the back corridor where the other staff were huddled. Then she turned her attention back to the kill zone. The intruder with the breaching tool had popped the door to 804. He was going in. The second man, the one with the limp and the gun, was scanning the station, looking for the person who had thrown the tank. Vala took a deep breath. She reached into the crash cart parked next to the desk. She bypassed the drugs. She grabbed the defibrillator paddles. They were the old kind, heavy plastic with coiled cords. She didn't turn the machine on. She didn't need the electricity. She needed the cords. She wrapped the cord around her hand, testing the tension. She checked her watch. 0205. Security response time in a blackout was typically 8 minutes. She had to hold the floor for 8 minutes. She moved around the edge of the desk, keeping low. The intruder with the gun was walking toward the bedroom, following the fleeing staff. He was leaving his partner unsupported at the target room. Mistake number 1. Vala stood up. She didn't sneak. She walked with purpose, her footsteps heavy enough to be heard over the fans. Hey, she said. The gunman turned, raising the weapon. He saw a nurse standing in the open, empty-handed, illuminated by the red emergency lights. He hesitated. It was the hesitation of a predator confused by prey that wasn't running. You're in my ward, Vala said calmly. Before he could process the absurdity of the statement, Vala kicked the rolling stool next to her. It shot across the floor, hitting the code cart, which slammed into the wall with a metallic crash. The gunman flinched, shifting his aim to the noise. Vala launched herself. She didn't go for the gun. She went for the arm holding it. She slammed into him, driving him back against the wall. Her hand wrapped in the heavy cord whipped around his wrist, trapping the weapon against his own chest. She drove her knee into his paranal nerve, the same spot the oxygen tank had hit. His leg buckled. He shouted a raw sound of pain and tried to headbutt her. Vala slipped the blow, guiding his head into the corner of the wall-mounted monitor. There was a sickening crack of plastic and bone. The man went limp, sliding down the wall. Vala caught the gun before it hit the floor. She checked the chamber, loaded, safety off. She looked at the weapon. It felt familiar, a heavy, cold weight that belonged in her hand. For a second, the muscle memory screamed to her to keep it, to use it, to clear the room the way she had been trained. But she couldn't. If she fired a gun, the police investigation would uncover everything. Her fingerprints, her stance, her groupings. The quiet life she had built in Philadelphia would be incinerated. She would be deployed again or debriefed in a windowless room for the next 10 years. She ejected the magazine. She racked the slide, ejecting the round in the chamber. She threw the gun into the biohazard sharps container on the wall. It clattered down into the plastic abyss. Gone. She was doing this the hard way. She turned toward room 804. The door was open. The lead intruder was inside. Torren Gage was helpless, strapped to a bed, recovering from chest surgery. VA grabbed a syringe of saxonyl-choline from the open crash cart, a paralytic used for incubation. She kept it. She moved toward the room, staying in the blind spot of the doorframe. She wasn't Nurse Rice anymore. Nurse Rice had clocked out. The emergency lights painted room 804 in shades of rust and shadow, distorting depth perception and turning the vital signs monitor into a glowing rhythmic pulse in the corner. Torren Gage lay on the bed, his chest rising and falling with the shallow hitching breaths of a man who knew he was about to die. He was awake. He was staring at the door, his hands gripping the sheets, unable to move due to the restraints and the heavy post-op sedation. The intruder stood at the foot of the bed. He was big, built like a linebacker, wearing the same grey coveralls as the man Vala had just neutralized in the hallway. He held a suppressed pistol in his right hand, leveled at Torren's chest. He wasn't rushing. He was savoring the silence, the power of being the only armed man in a room full of helpless people. Vala moved into the doorway. She didn't shout. She didn't announce herself. She made a sound, a sharp, deliberate click of her tongue against the roof of her mouth. The intruder spun, the suppressor swinging toward the noise. He expected a panicked nurse or a security guard fumbling with a radio. Instead, he saw Vala standing just inside the threshold, her hands empty, Her posture relaxed but coiled. "Step away from the patient," Vala said. Her voice was conversational, almost bored. The man laughed, a short, ugly sound. "Get out of here or you're next." Vala didn't move. She calculated the distance. 10 feet, the bed between them, the four-pole to her left, the tray table to his right. "You have a choice," Vala said, taking a step forward. "You can walk out of here and the police will pick you up in the parking lot, or you can stay and you won't walk out at all." The intruder's eyes narrowed. He realized something was wrong. Nurses didn't talk like this. They screamed. They ran. They begged. He raised the gun, aiming for her center mass. "Choice made," Vala whispered. She kicked the four-pole. It wasn't a random flail. It was a targeted strike. The heavy metal base of the pole slammed into the intruder's shin just below the knee. He grunted, stumbling sideways, his aim thrown off. The first shot went wide, burying itself in the drywall behind her with a soft thip. Vala closed the distance. She launched herself over the foot of the bed, using the mattress as a springboard. She didn't go for the gun. She went for his throat. Her forearm slammed into his windpipe, crushing the cartilage and cutting off his air. He gagged, dropping the weapon as his hands flew to his neck in panic. Vala drove him back against the wall, her knee coming up into his solar plexus. He doubled over, gasping for breath that wouldn't come. She grabbed his head, twisting it sharply to the side, driving his face into the hard plastic of the sharps container mounted on the wall. He slumped to the floor, unconscious but alive. "Toran." Gage stared at her, his eyes wide with shock. Who are you?" he rasped. Vala ignored.